All right, so I took my paper. This is rice paper, and I put it on the shiny side up or the smooth side up, and I loaded my brush with black ink and left a part of the heel or the body of the brush with water. And I painted the brush stroke from right to left with my brush at a slanted angle. When I reached this part where I knew I wanted to put a tree, I wet my brush and got rid of a lot of the color, but kept it at the same slanted angle. So here's what the angle of my brush looked like that. You can see it's close to touching the paper. So going from right to left, more of the color here, less here, and I blended it so you can see that it goes from the dark tones to mid-tones to just water here. So when this dried, it would look like the beige color of my paper. And I used liquid ink. So the good part about liquid ink is that you can get a really, really dark tone. You can blend it into lots of different colors, light to black, like shoe polish black. The disadvantage of using liquid ink is that it will spread and can bleed if you want to make your painting mounted or stretched when you put two pieces of paper together and you flatten out your rice paper for display. So generally, I would say you want to use the ground ink, which is a better choice. So as I cleaned my brush, I dried it off before this next step here. And I used only this tar or very viscous color, black here for the next step. And here, these are the mountains in the background. These would be in the foreground. And you can see how my brush moved. Like I want to keep my strokes rounded, and I didn't want to paint them up and down too much because I didn't want them to look like they were craggy hills, because the ones in the front are softer. So you can see here that this is all colored in here, and then over this part is I left some white spaces so that it can look like it's another layer of rock, gives it a little bit more interest. You can look like the moon's casting a shadow. Your choice, right? And then I wanted to make sure that when I painted the foreground hills that I made its own personality. I didn't want to make this shape like the back, but I did keep them soft. And then a lighter tone of ink for some foliage, some bushes or small trees. And then in the same tone of ink, I did the image of the tree trunk here and lightened it up a bit to have the leaves, because the leaves can, the color can come through the leaves. The leaves are more translucent. They're not totally solid. So I want you to see how the tree looks here before I go to the next step. This tree is pretty defined. It's called air holes, AIR holes. You have space. It doesn't look like a lollipop, right? So this is my preference, was my preference for my tree to look when I got finished. Then I took white paint with some yellow and painted in images, just squares and rectangles, what I wanted it to look like, lanterns coming up from below here, and use the same color to paint in the moon. Now, you can use a different color to paint in your moon if you like. I just kept it all in one color. The next step, and here's a close-up. Okay. And you can see that this is pretty concentrated. So I made sure I had lots and lots of color of this yellow, cadmium yellow on my brush. Okay, let's go to the next step here. This is what I call a wash. So it's some black ink, and then I mixed in some brown into it to make it more soft, and blended it onto my plate. Versus this is just straight ink. Okay. And this is tape. I took some glue, and up in the right-hand corner here is the hide glue. It's kind of a caramel color, but it's clear. And this is the, down here is the wood glue. These are both by Type Bond. I showed you the picture of them. Right, here's the picture of them. Now, the reason why I mix in glue into my wash is so that whatever I paint with it will become less streaky. The more glue I add into my water with my ink, the less streaky it'll be. Okay. Yeah. And then I turned over my painting so that now you see the tree on the right-hand side, whereas when it was face up, the tree was on the left-hand side. So I chose to put my wash, which will represent the sky, on the backside so that it would be less, that you would see the brush strokes less, and that it may be more muted. So that's up to you what you want to do. Right. And this area would be like misty and cloudy. Okay. So here's what I did. I took the wash that was now this brownish black, and I used my brush and I started moving it across the sky in this triangle shape. But my brush pretty much would be painting it on this way, a little tiny bit like that, but I know that this kind of paper would show my brush strokes. And before I got to the area where I had painted in my lanterns and my tree, I took a little bit of clear water and dampened that area so that when I paint my wash, it wouldn't cover up my lantern or my tree. And you can see here that what it did was, because I used liquid ink, it got obliterated, that word that I have a hard time pronouncing, all right? So it turned it from a graceful looking tree into a lollipop tree. So even teacher can make errors, and I kept it that way to show you what happens when we use liquid ink and we're not careful, all right? I could tell a tattletale and say I did it deliberately, but no, this is just so that you won't do this, all right? You can prevent this from happening so when you dampen your brush, you make sure it's not very, very wet, and you can add a little bit of glue to your water too. And then wait a while after you paint for it to dry a little bit. Then next step here is my finished wash. And you can see how even though I put some ink, not ink, sorry, some glue into my color, that it still created these brush strokes. But I kept my brush strokes pretty much horizontal so that they would look more like clouds and be kind of like a little abstract looking, starry, starry night looking, right? Okay. Then I turned it back over to the front. And here's my water bowl. This used to be clear water. And by painting, the water became darkened. I took advantage of this dirty water to paint in this portion here. So, and I did that over the front. You can see here, I've done in the area where we're supposed to have the lanterns coming up through the water or the sky. There you can see light gray strokes. And there's a little more defined. I found that I wanted it to be more pronounced, so I mixed my dirty water in with a little bit more ink color and got this effect. Left lots of spaces so that it would look cloudy and undefined, and then took some color like red and blue and green and orange and painted over some of the yellow to get colorful looking lanterns. And also took more dabs of my cadmium to emphasize some of the yellow lanterns and definitely emphasize the sun, the moon rather, sorry. Okay, and that's my final composition. So thank you very much for watching.